Hello everybody, this is Chaotic Bibliophile. So, I am not going to say that this is me finally catching up because that has come back to bite me in the ass before. So I'm just going to say this is a video of me talking about all of the books that I read in October, plus 2 books I think that I finished in the first few days of November that are fiction, and therefore I don't want to review them for nonfiction November. Let's just start with a short history of queer women, which is sadly a DNF that I will be getting rid of just because I don't want to keep books that I didn't finish. I think a lot of people will appreciate this much more than I. We've been selling so much of these at the bookshop because it's like a really fun, easy read. It's just that kind of writing that is trying really, really hard to be funny, and I just find cringy. This is what it says on the tin, and I'm sure a lot of people will vibe with it. I think it's a wonderful project. It's short, it's a great present. So if you know people who like sort of explicitly jokey writing but also wants to find out about queer women, this is for them. You already know that I DNF'd this if you saw my nonfiction November TBR and possibly pile video with Danny, which I will link down below and in the eye as always. All right, moving on to all the books that I did finish. I will do the opposite that I usually do just because I want to. I usually talk first about the ebooks that I read, or in this case even an audiobook that I listened to, but I'm just going to do physical books first. Anyways, let's start with El Hombre del Cartel by María José Ferrada. Sadly, this is not translated to English yet, but I did talk about her first novel, How to Order the Universe, which was nominated for the BookTube Prize, and I placed first. Sadly, didn't make the final cut, and I think a lot more people should hype it up and read it. This is somewhat similar. It also features a child narrator that we discover sort of halfway through has a specific relationship to the protagonist, more like protagonist, like the focus of attention, because the narrator is the protagonist. So the literal English translation for this would be something like The Man on the Billboard. It's about Ramon, who goes to live on this billboard just because he feels tired of everything else, and how this affects this working class community, I think in Santiago, although I'm not sure if that's ever explicitly addressed. It's about class divide, specifically within like a working class neighborhood, and people who are essentially homeless and how they interact. There is a really interesting portrayal of community life in these sort of communities that it's not uniquely Chilean, but the way it's depicted here speaks to a very specific Chilean image of like houses that are built around certain spaces. It also, of course, talks about age and family relationships and respectability politics. It's very interesting. Again, all filtered through the child narrator, who this time is a boy of about 10, I'd say. I did really, really enjoy this. However, because I read it so close to How to Order the Universe, How to Order the Universe is just like a masterpiece in my opinion. It's so, so good. Whereas this is good, but even though it's so short, it does feel like it could have been a short story perhaps. Like it could have been even tighter. Whereas How to Order the Universe, I find perfectly paced, and I just really, really love it. I'm wondering now if it will make my top reads of 2022, and it just might. So I do recommend this if you read in Spanish and have already read How to Order the Universe. Give this a try, and I hope this will be translated as well because it is really, really good. But yeah, the other one was better, which is always such an unfair thing to say, but I can't help it because I'm human. Then the low-key overdue book club pick for October. This is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. If I hadn't had so many things lined up to read, I would have gone out and bought the second and third book in the series right away. I loved this so much. This is about 4 women who go into this area to explore, and one of them is a biologist that is the narrator. There are other professions that now I forget, and it is important. It's been a while since I read it, but it's so quietly eerie. It's so unsettling. It's just brilliant. how it builds character, how it ties everything together. It starts almost unnervingly slow, but in a way that's always intriguing. Like, I never felt not compelled to keep reading this book. As the story unravels and you start to understand a little bit more, you get even more creeped out by the possibilities. And that is what is so great, is that there isn't one single answer at any given time. So you really do get this experience of going with the biologist and finding stuff out as she finds out, although even that gets questioned later on. So definitely whenever I get to record those in-depth discussions, I will have to refresh on this, definitely. But also I am really looking forward to talking a little bit more about the specifics, because I think this should be a book that people go in knowing nothing more than maybe the premise of like these 4 women going to this area to explore. But that's it. Everything else, you just have to be immersed. It is so good. The writing is amazing. There are certain aspects where it gets too Lovecraftian, where I felt like, oh, this could have been polished a little bit, but other than that, it's just one of the best reads of this year, definitely in the fiction category. Just so good. Can't wait to carry on. Can't wait to discuss it in depth with you guys. I hope you pick this up. If not, there's still time. We need to talk about it because it's okay, then finally, the one that I teased from September that I wanted to tell you about. I've been screaming about this book nonstop. I actually wrote a review for my bookshop. I wanted to contextualize this more. Basically, I'm working at a bookshop now. It is a really small but really well curated bookshop. It's interesting because, of course, we have to stock sort of the main bestsellers things. And so if you see the new arrivals, it looks very much like any other bookshop, but then you start going through the shelves and we have amazing books, guys. I'm not kidding. Anyways, part of that job is that I get to review books that I love, that we sell at the shop, so I can then recommend it and we can make posts about it on social media, blah, blah, blah. This was one of the first books that I bought when I first got that job. I just loved it. It's All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Mathews, or Thankam Mathews. This I call the ultimate millennial novel. So here's the thing. Sneha is this ambitious, gutsy, queer young woman who is Indian American, daughter of immigrants, and we know something's happened there, but we don't know what exactly at the beginning, so I won't spoil it for you. The novel kicks off when she negotiates a higher salary for this new position at a startup that she moves to Milwaukee to work in. We get a sense that she is a go-getter. She is called a rock star by her potential boss, and then her life starts falling apart. The job is exploitative, shocking. The startup turns out to be very shady. She tries and fails to make friends or to connect to people because she's very closed off and very stoic, and so she has to learn how to sort of navigate, first of all, economic hardship, and then also community. I kid you not, it is one of the best examples of how the everyday can be analyzed without it being paragraphs of artificial philosophical discourse, which sometimes I do like. It's not that I hate it, but I think often it's done poorly, and this novel did away with it. It just explores all the themes through the characters in a way that is so masterful. There is queerness and gender identity, and the way it is explored is so fascinating because one of the protagonist's friends comes out, and that sort of threatens her gender identity a bit because she is queer. The way that's analyzed is so subtle, but it's so effective. Of course, the class issue as well, and the money issue, and then suddenly eviction looms over her, and she has to deal with all this anxiety that is also inherited from her parents. So it's just a whole network of things. She's also navigating dating and having a real relationship for the first time. What I keep highlighting is that people in here talk and text and behave like actual people. I found myself so enthralled that I couldn't stop thinking about these characters. She was nominated for the National Book Award. I don't know if she's gonna win. I have not read the other nominees, although a few of them look really, really good, and I really want to read those as well. But regardless, this is a debut novel as well. So the nomination itself already speaks volumes, and it's completely well deserved. I am urging everyone to pick this book up. Another great book Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. It was a good hardback month, basically. This is the first book, actually, in a loose trilogy, the Crossroads trilogy, that supposedly is going to reach 2019 or 2020. I don't know. I'm really excited. I don't think Franzen has ever done anything like this, and I definitely want to read everything Franzen's ever written. He's just so good. I buddy read this with Danny and we both gushed. And it was interesting because we read the corrections together a while ago and the correction grabbed us right away, whereas this, it took a while for us to really get into. So this is a family saga, as per usual with Franzen, about this family in the 60s. They live in a small town. The father is a reverend. The mother is a frustrated housewife who has brilliance in her, but also a dark past. They have 4 children. One of them is Becky. She's really popular. She gets involved in the Crossroads youth group, where the figure of Rick Ambrose, who is not really a pastor, but he's kind of like a spiritual leader and, 60s cult-ish adjacent behavior. We'll delve into that in the book. And then there's Clem, who's at uni, who falls in love for the first time and completely loses his mind. Then there's Perry, who is this really weird stoner guy, and then Judson, who is the baby. And we get all these stories with third-person chapters that are focused on one of them. It really jumps across temporalities, but it does so with perfect control of each narrative. Every piece of information that you're fed is just deliberately placed for maximum effect without being manipulative. It's just great style. Speaking of which, I also found really interesting how it is not trying to be historically accurate to the extreme. It's not trying to mimic 60s speech, but there are some word choices and adjectives choices in particular, some loose slang here and there that makes it, oh, this is not trying also to be super modern. It's just so well constructed and the characters are so compelling. At so many points they are so hateful and you hate them, but you're still interested because they are real people. They are so three-dimensional and it's just a great narrative. I will say I don't think it's better than the corrections. I just think that novel is great, but it did affect me profoundly. At the end, I just had to send Danny voice notes because I was freaking out with everything that happens. It does feel like a little thin at the beginning, a little rushed at the end, and the middle is the meat, but it's so good that I still recommend it. I would 100% reread it. I'm so looking forward to the next one, which is not like a straight up sequel. Whatever Franzen releases next, I'm there. And actually, Danny and I will be buddy reading Purity and Freedom, which Freedom for me is a reread. So look forward to that. We might actually, at some point, Danny, if you're watching this, we might have to film a Franzen spotlight together, because out of all the authors that we've read together, that we like together, Franzen seems like such an odd choice for the both of us. Why do we connect so much with his books? But it's because they're just so good. And let's move on, otherwise I will keep gushing. Another book that I kind of buddy read with Danny because we reviewed it for Pluma Pantalla. Remember, it's our podcast in Spanish. Link down below as always. Sabrina by Dnarso. We've tried googling how to pronounce his name. We're still not 100% sure. Anyways, this is a graphic novel. It's about the disappearance of Sabrina, but more than that, it's about the after effects of such disappearance. So we never see any actual violence being committed, but because of the way the story is relayed, we understand that awful things have been done to her, and we follow basically a friend of her boyfriend who wasn't even such a serious boyfriend apparently. They weren't really living together, or I don't know, from the interactions between the boyfriend and the family, you get this idea that he wasn't like a part of the family, although he did know them. So it's a very murky territory. And we also see Sabrina's sister at times as well. It is an entirely quiet, very cinematic graphic novel where silence and frames are used really, really judiciously. The palette is also very muted, as you can see. It's very interesting what it does with media and reporting and the commentary on national narratives of horror and murder in the face of violence, and specifically violence against women and true crime culture, all of that. Conspiracy theories as well. So it is all sadly still too relevant. All that commentary emerges pretty organically from the narrative, which I really appreciated. I didn't like it as much as his short stories. I think the pacing that the artist chooses works better in short form. However, I think this should be compulsory reading. This was nominated for the Booker Prize, the first and only, I think, graphic novel to have that honor, and it was completely well deserved. It is just such an important read that at the same time is so skillfully crafted. I really recommend it. It's really affecting in a very subtle way. I think, again, everyone should pick this up because it's fascinating. And because its narrative is so cinematic, it's actually a really good entry point to graphic novels, because I think the language that it uses is mostly borrowed or in conversation with cinema and TV, and especially true crime, sometimes to subvert it explicitly. So I think it's very approachable for people who normally wouldn't pick up graphic novels. So yeah, that was Sabrina. It's really, really good. Highly recommend. 2 books by Jessica Love, Julián is a Mermaid and Julián at the Wedding, which are beautifully illustrated about this gender non-conforming kid, Julián, who really wants to dress as a mermaid in the first one, and in the second he helps make a dress, and it's just fabulous. It's one of those books that is so joyful and affirming, and it's zero conflict, and I wish every child could read. It's basically you do you. Oh, what I will say, it incorporates the family in a way that's very affirming. So it doesn't discuss identity at all, which I'm not saying is bad. Like, there are other books that explicitly address lots of types of identity. Here is more about behavior and how behavior is just natural. Like, if you want to wear a dress, then that's fine. And sort of the idea that Julián wants to be a mermaid, why not? The grandma is great. And then my first audiobook, Gabo and Mercedes, A Farewell, by Rodrigo García. This is a memoir by the son of Gabriel García Márquez about his parents and especially his father's last days. It is one of those memoirs that is only interesting because his dad was a fascinating, amazing writer. But the memoir itself is not interestingly written at all. I like the narration, I will say that. It was like a good narration. It was kind of slow, so I listened to it at like 1.25 speed or something like that, because I still want to feel like someone is talking to me, right? I don't want it to feel like blah, 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 no. But I do want a bit more pace than someone's reading at this speed. So yeah, I just feel mean saying this about a memoir about a father dying, but it was just so name-droppy and so just trusting that the fact that, I don't know, the president went to say goodbye to the father is enough to carry the memoir. And it's just not. I am a firm believer that memoirs have to be interesting in their own right. They have to provide an analysis outside of the experience itself, unless the person is themselves unbelievably famous. But even then, I read good and bad examples of celebrity memoirs. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this unless you're like a really, really big Gabriel García Márquez fan. Then you might want it for the information. Oh, some of the metaphors are so heavy-handed, and I tuned out a lot during this book because it was just like, I don't like this writing. And I said I wasn't going to be mean about it, but I was a little bit. I'm sorry. Let's move on to the next book that I actually adore. It's called Leina and the Lord of the Toadstools by Nicolas Digard and Myriam Dahman. Oh my god, I read that terribly. It's by Nicolas Digard and Myriam, Dahman. This is a wonderful illustrated book. It is a children's book, but I would say if your kid is easily scared, then don't get them this. If they are into creepy stuff, you can start like at 8 maybe, and then for 10 or even 13 years old, this would be great because the illustrations are beautiful. It's a beautiful hardback cover. The protagonist is not that young either. So yeah, basically this is about a girl who goes to the forest and falls trap of the evil toad, who at first pretends to be a friend. It's a kind of book that I think adults and older readers just appreciate more because it is just so beautiful, and it's doing a bit of, not like complex things, but it's a bit creepy in like a lemony sneaky sort of way, without the snark, but with that sort of evil can be anywhere kind of ethos, which is always fun when it's done for children, I think. Again, it's just beautiful. I actually want to get my own copy of this because it's so nice. I really want to have it and reread it. It's just like a beautiful book, and I really highly recommend it. Then we have Assembly by Natasha Brown, which was the winner of the George Orwell Prize, I think. This is okay. Everyone loves it, and I feel like I would have loved it more had I not read All This Could Be Different first. Basically, this is the disembodied voice of a woman of color living in the UK, and I think she is from the UK as well, as in born and raised, which is important just because, you know, the idea of where are you originally from and that sort of thing. She is a very good worker. She might be a lawyer or something. She has some sort of corporate job, and she's dating this posh guy with liberal parents, and also, you know, trying to live in this terrible economy and political climate. It's a commentary also on liberal allies who aren't so really, and their prejudice. It is a commentary on so many things, and it is such a short book, and I think it is effective, especially if you read it in one sitting. However, I am a bit tired of these narratives that are just the idea and this every person, which again can work. It's just for me here it was too all on the surface. It didn't grab me, again, especially after All This Could Be Different, which I think provides so much of the same commentary, but in a way that's so smart and sensitive and with actual characters. I just think that appeals to me better. But if you want a book that's almost like a really creative essay focalized through a fictional eye, then I think this is a good choice. It's still very, very well written, and it's still very good. So although it wasn't my personal favorite, I still acknowledge and wholeheartedly recommend it, especially if you are in need of something that is both easy to read but really substantial. Yeah, I think this is a good one. It's a really interesting one. I also want to talk about All the Ways to Be Smart by Davina Bell and Allison Colpoys, which is another really cute illustrated book that talks about all the ways that there is to be smart. What I think is lovely about this is that it literally talks about so many different ways, including the traditional ones, because I think it's also important to not completely discount it, because there are kids that are going to be good at that and that will find pleasure in that, and I think that's good. But also, you know, it talks about craft, it talks about understanding people, it talks about being brave, it talks about being adventurous and curious, being artistic, and it's just really, really cute. I think this has more of a rhyme scheme compared to the other books that I read that are more like story focused, which is always nice. I love me a good sort of sing-songy sort of children's book. I really, really loved it. This is one that I would also gift a lot to a lot of kids of different ages, but especially if they are starting preschool or school. I think it's just really, really great and highly recommend. A book that I don't have here because I am currently writing a review of it for the bookshop and I left it there is Idle Burning by Rin Usami. I think it's translated by Asa Yoneda. This is a fascinating little novella about a girl who is a dedicated fan. She has a blog where she uploads posts and she's very active in the music fandom. She is a fan of an idol, which she calls her Oshi. And it is interesting because this book is sold so much as a tale about obsession and fandom culture. And Yeah, it is in a way, but she's not that obsessed. I think the main point of the book, and if you read, there is a Q&A with the writer as well, and she does touch upon this as well. It is not only that she's a dedicated fan, is that she has always, even before knowing about this idol and being a fan, she always struggled just with schoolwork and functioning and understanding life in a much more convenience store woman sort of way. And so what having a Noshi does for her is give her this sense of achievement and accomplishment. People online look up to her and want to see her thoughts, and this idea of like understanding this person really gives her a purpose to her every day, where everyone else is saying she can't do stuff, that she's dumb, or she's not trying hard enough. So there is this thing that she can ace, basically. So it's not a look into fandom per se, I wouldn't say. I think it's more a look into modern ways of coping, but it's still very compassionate towards the fan and the way she talks about other types of fans that we would consider more like the traditional fans who are like romantically interested in their idols or like admire them and want to be them. It's a very quietly intense book, much like the protagonist herself. So I really, really recommend it if you are interested in that sort of thing. The author is also very young, so I think if she had had a bit more time to develop it, especially the ending, maybe could be better. Although maybe didn't, maybe like everything is perfectly paced for what it is. It is a novella. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. I think I have to sit with it a little bit more. But it's still fascinating. Again, if you are interested in these themes, you should definitely pick it up. This idea of writing this passionately, which is very in right now, about something that is all passion and obsession, the ways in which those intersect, I think is really rich and fruitful. By the way, this won the Akutagawa Prize, and I think it's very well deserved because the writing is beautiful. It also has illustrations, and I like that this edition not only has the illustrations, which are really nice, it has a translator's note, a Q&A with the author, and a brief illustrator's note, and all of those enriched my experience of the book. And again, it's so short, it's just very unassuming, but very well done, and I am really glad I read it. Speaking of obsession and intensity, the last book I want to tell you about is a book I'm obsessed with. It is definitely one of the best books that I read the whole year and that I can't stop thinking about, and that is Vladimir by Luisa May Jonas. This book is, again, first-person narrative about this 50-something university professor whose husband is now being accused of sexual misconduct at the university with students. But the thing is, she not only has known about these things, but to her, these aren't really episodes of abuse or misconduct at all. So she's grappling with these ideas. At the same time, she is dealing with her own career and her age and how the actions of her husband are impacting her own public persona. Her relationship with her husband has always been very amiable. They have been together for more than 20 years, but they've both had other very significant and intense relationships outside of the marriage. And also there is this new professor who comes to teach at the department, Vladimir, who is a Russian, I believe, emigre. He is a brilliant writer and very sexy man, and she begins to be really taken by him. He has a wife who I don't remember if she already published her memoir and it was brilliant, or she's going to, but she received like a big advance. But basically she's also a brilliant writer. So it's a lot about gender politics, it's a lot about university politics, it's a lot about desire and age. I feel like so many people will hate this just based on the voice. It is a very challenging, morally ambiguous voice, because the protagonist thinks she's had everything figured out and suddenly she's starting to question everything. She is a very strong woman. However, she's always had hang-ups about her body and her weight, and she always wants to be desirable. She tells it like it is, but then also she examines her own motivations in a way that leads her down some horrible paths it's so fascinating. You know what I mean? There's this line where she says, all my colleagues think this generation is fragile and soft and they resent them for it and that they can't cope. And she's like, but no, it's false. They are actually the strongest of us. They aren't afraid to stand up for themselves and demand softly that we respect them, and so they will prevail with their softness. And I butchered that quote, that's not like the literal quote, but that's the essence of it. And when I read that, I was like, oh my god. So it's one of those books where everyone is a little horrible and everyone has sort of secrets and desires. There is a subplot with the protagonist's daughter. At first we have this idea of the daughter, and then when the daughter actually comes, we're like, oh wait, you told me she was like this, but actually it's just so good. I am obsessed. Again, I feel like a lot of people will hate this because just the voice, because sometimes you don't know if the author is supporting this or not. And I feel like that is the point. I don't think she's endorsing it at all. I think also if you read the end, you know exactly what the book is trying to do. It's definitely not condoning the actions. It's just interrogating sort of this old school mindset versus the new mindset where we're more mindful of boundaries and hierarchies and power dynamics. Again, it's all about power and desire and gender and university, and it's done in amazing prose. It does get a little crazy towards the end, I'm not gonna lie. It's like not a perfectly constructed book. It could have been better edited, but when a book is so utterly enjoyable, and it's also analyzing an institution that I am fascinated by, which is the university environment, so smartly and with such layered compelling characters, I can't fault it for it. It is still one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. Even if you're gonna hate it, give it a shot because you should. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, and there are more books that I have been reading. They are for a really special video project that I'm planning to do. So I'm not gonna say any more about that. I really want to have this video up at the latest during the first 2 weeks of December, so look out for that. I am really putting a lot of effort into it, and I hope you like it. But other than that, I think this video is long enough already. I've mentioned a lot of great books, a lot of also not that great, but mostly I think great books. I think my reading life has been good. I'm still struggling to make time to read as much as I would like to, but I think I'm getting better at it. I think I've been reading amazing stuff. So regardless of the quantity, if the quality is there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please tell me if you've read any of these books, if you would like to read any of these books, or what you've been reading lately. I'm always curious to know. Yeah, that's it. When will this be up? Who knows? See you next time. It is so interesting. It is one of the best, and okay, this has gone through a very weird rabbit hole. I've been talking at this camera for a while, as I think you can tell.